Oh, mine's working.
No, but the thing's gone off. I'm sorry if you're wondering why we are a little bit late starting. I'm just waiting for the arrival of Rob Tranter. So if you'll please be patient for 5 minutes. Thank you. Right, good afternoon everyone and welcome to our Planning Committee meeting. Now on the 1st of May, I hope it's the start of spring. And Rob did give his apologies, so I'm sure we're glad to see him here anyway. Can't very well start the planning meeting without him. Please could everybody make sure that their mobile phones are switched off. We don't have a lot of members in the public area, only 2, so welcome to you up there. Can you hear all right? Right, thank you. Right, first of all, introductions. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards, Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right.
County Councillor Peter Clark.
Robert Tranter, Monitoring Officer and Head of Legal Services and the Legal Advisor to this committee.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning, Housing and Place Shaping.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Craig O'Connor, Development Management Area Manager.
Thank you all very much for that, and please could the committee be patient and wait at the end of the meeting after we finish live streaming, only for about 5 minutes, if you could kindly oblige. Thank you. Right, any apologies first, please?
No apologies received, Chair.
Right, thank you. It looked as though we were a full complement today. Declarations of interest, please. Councillor Evans?
Yes, Madam Chair, this 00380 and 00381. I'm a member on the committee on housing and I'm a tenant.
Right, thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Anne Webb?
Same for me, Madam Chair, and thank you very much. Except I'm on the board of Happy. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
So Chairman, if I may, on both those applications then, that's a personal and a prejudicial interest, so you'll need to leave the meeting whilst those applications are being considered, please. Thank you.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Right, thank you, Rob. I said we couldn't start the meeting without you to make sure everything's above board. Right, we now go on to the application, the minutes of the last meeting. That was on the 10th of April. These are for accuracy only. Oops. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7 and page 8. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Moved by Councillor Higgins and seconded, please. Show of hands for approval. Thank you all very much indeed. Now we go on to the applications of the committee for today. Right, first one, is that you, Phil?
Yeah, I'll take this first one.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you, Phil.
As members will recall, this was considered at the last meeting. It was deferred. If you can remember, it was the fencing up at the development on the side of the old Cooper's Filters in Abergavenny, East Llanfoist, and there were concerns about the impact of the fencing from the water meadows looking across to it, and also it was subject to a site visit. So it was deferred pending consideration of how the planting could be secured in front of the fencing, which was on third-party land. Indeed, it's on council land. Following the meeting, there were discussions involving the case officer, the applicant, agent and local member, and this led to the offer from the applicant's agent of painting the fencing green. That's been done in good faith, and you can see that's the trellis at the back, and the fence behind it has been painted a green colour. Let's have a look, and I've got the shade of, no, it doesn't really, but it's a very darkish shade of green. Yeah, but that's what it that's what it looks like. I'll leave it on that slide. Whilst that's not quite what members' instructions were, we feel as officers really that that's sufficient really to blend the fence into the backdrop as viewed from across the water meadows, and we think in time with the planting behind, which is in the control of the applicant and is more likely to be successful than planting on third-party land, which could have difficulty in terms of future maintenance. We feel this is a good offer, an acceptable offer to actually render the application now acceptable in planning terms, visual terms. So we continue to recommend approval on the basis of the paint of the fence being painted this colour green and maintained in perpetuity. And there's actually a condition set out in the report to ensure that is maintained. So thank you.
Right, thank you very much. The local member is a member of the committee, and I think he says he's quite happy if you all are. Do you wish to move the application for approval, Councillor?
Well, Chair, I just wanted to make a very brief point. I did revisit the site again from the applicant's side as well. I think perhaps it's a lesson for the future, and I don't want to say too much again because I think I said enough last month. But the fact that we approve plans with boundary or landscaping treatments on them, and they're not conditioned to be maintained in perpetuity, I think highlights in this case, and all the neighbouring properties further along down to Merthyr Road and towards the bridge, is that any of the properties there could put any kind of boundary treatment or means of enclosure up within permitted development rights that will possibly have a greater impact than this. And I just think there's little point in trying to control boundaries at the front when you've got a prominent site like this, and we haven't done the same at the rear. So I hope that we'll pay a greater focus when we see subsequent developments like this at other sites.
Thank you. So do you wish to move for approval? No. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Harris has moved for approval. And you have a seconder in Councillor Evans. Show of hands for approval, please. Right, thank you all very much. Whoops. Application on page 13 to 18. And this is double 01, is it?
Yes,
Yes.
number one.
Number one.
2018.
There's a lot of zeros there.
First
And this-
application we received.
This is in Landvale, Kilgettin. This for you again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So this site is a proposal for 5 dwellings. It's an outline application with all matters reserved for future consideration, but it's on the site that's actually allocated in the LDP as what we call a 60-40 site. And that means that 60% of the houses allowed on the site will have to be of an affordable nature, and the other 40% market housing to help bring that site forward. So this is the site that's proposed and allocated in the LDP for this settlement. There has been discussion from some local residents that the site's the settlement isn't that sustainable. The school's shut since the allocation. Nevertheless, it remains an allocation, and that is the material consideration for members today. It's still an extant allocation in the development plan, so we consider the application on that basis. And there is, in any case, a need for affordable housing in the area, and I don't think there's any argument with that particular issue. So just having a quick look, that's the site there. It's off a fairly narrow cul-de-sac there, which does have some on-street parking. But it is a small cul-de-sac. There's some bungalows to the right as you move towards the site, which is a field to the left-hand side of that picture. That's the field. Some of it was ploughed yesterday. That's where some of the proposed houses will go. And that's the remainder of the field. It won't go up as far as that. We were pointed out where it would run. It'll be some way pulled away from where that topmost ploughed area is. And then that's another angle. And then that's the approach from Gethin Place. So it's looking with the site with your back to it. And then that's looking back the opposite direction towards the site itself. So there's the site edge red. And that's the area edge red. The other area in blue is owned by the applicant. And there's a proposed new drainage ditch to run to the left-hand side there, which will help overcome drainage issues, surface water drainage issues, which have created surface water flooding in the area. And then that's an indicative layout. I hasten to say it's indicative because all matters are reserved, but that shows how a development could proceed on there with some sort of adopted turning head coming into the site from the existing highway, a field gate to the left, which continues access into the field for agricultural purposes, and then the 2 market houses immediately there, plots 1 and 2, if you can call them that, and then one smaller detached affordable, and then 2 semis over on that side. But again, all of those issues are for further consideration as part of the reserve matters, but I'll leave it on that particular slide. So there have been concerns from some local residents and the community council about access and traffic. It is an allocation in the development plan, so those issues were considered at that particular stage when allocating the site. There is scope to accept a smaller amount of traffic that would be associated with this limited sort of development off that narrow cul-de-sac, and all off-street parking would be provided within the site, so there's no further need for any further on-street parking to take place on Gethin Place, so the existing situation should not be exacerbated by this particular proposal. Indeed, there will be additional visitor parking spaces provided within the site, and those spaces where there was informal parking within the existing turning head would be formalised to create 3 spaces for the existing bungalows, and some of that is actually within the application site, so that would ensure that the existing situation is not made any worse and is retained. There's also adequate privacy distance that can be maintained between the dwellings, but again that's a matter for detail at the reserve matters stage. And the main issue about flooding, as this has been an issue raised locally, there is a Welsh Government scheme to overcome local surface water flooding, which this will help bring forward, and some of that drainage will be created on this particular site. That is subject to Welsh Government funding, but there is a reasonable prospect of that taking place. So what we propose to do in terms of this particular scheme is to put what we call a grampian condition down, that no work commences on the actual houses until that surface water scheme has been implemented in full, so that then this scheme will not have any impact upon any existing surface water problem, and indeed there should be a better solution, in fact, for the whole of the village. So there is that grampian condition to control that element of the scheme. So subject to Section 106 agreement requiring the market housing not to be constructed without the required provision of the affordable housing and the grampian condition, which I mentioned, as well as other conditions set out, we would recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Well, a good many of us turned out yesterday's site visit, so I'll welcome comments, and that's a good description of Phil, all that was involved with our visit yesterday. So anybody like to start on the observations? Right, Councillor Brown and then Councillor Howard.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just asking, you mentioned about visitor parking spaces. Are they for those particular houses, or are they for the rest of the street? I mean, what's the intention there? Thank you.
Yeah, on that, there's visitor parking spaces here. Those are to serve visitors who are visiting this area, but in effect there'd be no restriction on other people from the wider area or visitors parking in there. It's just who parks in their first come, first serve. But you can imagine it would be particularly appropriate for visitors to these particular properties to park in them because they're nearer to those properties. Those are the dedicated spaces I referred to that would serve the bungalows there, which is actually a turning head at the moment, so that would be re-engineered as just a parking area. So the main carriageway extends here and the turning area would be there. Albeit that would be subject to detailed consent at reserve matter stage. So I hope that explains.
Okay, right. Anything else?
Yeah, sorry. Just I presume then that the intention is that for the road and the visitors' parking spaces to be adopted in the normal way then, presumably? Because obviously you've said visitor spaces can
that would be a matter
by
for the developer, but certainly the turning area would normally be built to adoptable standards because it's supposed to accept a refuse vehicle to be able to go up there and turn around. There's no reason why the rest of it couldn't be a private driveway that's maintained by the residents or a private management company, but it could be to adoptable standards. That's a matter for the developer.
Thank you. Councillor Howard?
I'm happy to move approval, Chairman. I note the points made by the objectors. The drainage one will be addressed in reserve matter stage. Now, I'm not quite sure why we've got conditions 3 and 4. They're not necessary because no development can commence, can it, until we get that later application. But the issue with the LDP and it being a candidate site weighs heavily in its favour. But even if it wasn't a candidate site, I think there is a need for affordable housing in some of the smaller villages. Because it's not just necessarily a matter of access to a school. It's about supporting family connections. So I'm happy to move approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris, then Councillor Feakin, then Councillor Blakeborough.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is in the LDP and 60% is affordable, which is absolutely brilliant. Once again, we just need as many affordables as is possible. And it's good to see the 3 parking spaces for residents, and I'm sure that can be worked in such a way when we finally get round to see the full plans that we can make sure that it's just for residents there. I think it's as I say, it's already in the LDP. It's a good use of that plot of land. It's been proposed, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Feakin.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a good site. 60-40, 60 affordable housing is a good contribution to a rural settlement. So I think it's a fantastic scheme. Just thinking about the construction traffic when it's actually being built, rather than dragging it all through Gethin Place, there is another field access into that field off of the main road. as all matters are reserved, is it possible that that could be considered for a short-term haul route for the construction traffic to save that all having to go past the existing residences?
Well, we could condition a construction management plan, but the route would normally be the subject to highway approval, and I'm not sure what they would think of it coming through a field. I'm not sure. I can't really comment. I'm not a highway officer, so they might think that Gethin Place is a lesser of two evils. I don't know. In which case, it's how it's managed, what time deliveries arrive, and avoiding the main rush hours. That sort of so it avoids when people come back from work, for instance, in the sort of late afternoon, early evening, perhaps. But we could condition a construction management plan if members think that that's appropriate given the narrow access approach.
And for me then, Phil, thanks for that. It wasn't so much necessarily looking for a condition on it. It's more that can we keep it, the sort of freedom in our minds that we could have that discussion with the applicant, and that if it was a possibility, that would be an improvement on the existing proposal. But as all matters are reserved, it wouldn't necessarily need to be conditioned in this part, I wouldn't have said.
I can understand where you're coming from, to think that if depends on what the land will take and how much movement there would be, and if the applicant is amenable, as he is the owner of the land as well. But I'm sure the officers could have a conversation.
I think the only meaningful way you could do it is via a condition, because otherwise it's voluntary and there's no power for us to enforce it. So I think it would have to be a condition.
Yeah.
You're not looking for a condition.
No. Right. Councillor Blakeborough, then Councillor Webb, and then Councillor Brown again.
Oh, there you go. So it's 60-40, 3 affordable housing. Interesting, one of the concerns was that the LDP, when they looked at the need, it was when the school was open. But as you say, it's in the LDP. There is a need for affordable housing. Just a couple of questions. One of them, does the school belong to Monmouthshire County Council, and in the future are we looking to sell that land to build on? It doesn't have any effect on this application, but just out of interest with that. One of my concerns was flooding, but obviously condition 4 has alleviated my concerns over that. In terms of the narrow sort of access to the site and the fact that there's no footpath, when you're looking at safe walking routes legislation and also disability access and those kind of issues, is this going to sort of create a problem that there is no footpath? Because I do know when we do any developments, we're always saying we need wide enough footpaths for disability access, safe walking routes, and obviously when you've got children and that kind of thing. I don't know whether there will be, an issue with that really.
We can't. Yeah, you can't provide a footpath up along Gethin Place. It looks as if it's owned by the residents up to the carriageway there. There's fences, hedges, all sorts of obstructions there. So if it was to be appropriate by the Highway Authority to put footways in, I think it might cause more harm than good, really. I mean, traffic's going to be driving very slowly along there anyway because of the narrowness and the on-street parking on occasions there. So I think it's almost like a shared space, isn't it, the way it works? And pedestrians really would take priority, I would have thought, in that sort of environment. And the point being that 5 additional housing units will create very, very small amount of additional traffic beyond what is using that fairly narrow highway already. So I think it's a matter of horses for courses, if I can say that, and this shouldn't create a problem or tension in terms of highway safety. And it wouldn't have been allocated without further thought on that in the first instance, in any case.
And I know this is just outline planning, so we haven't got the detail, and that is part of the problem, I think. So do you go from that road straight onto the drives of these houses, or is there a footpath along those houses?
Chair, it's all indicative at the moment within the red line. I wouldn't have thought there would be a path provided within the site because it wouldn't lead anywhere. You just come onto the carriageway that we just looked at. So it would be a slightly pointless request because in effect you'd walk from plots 1 and 2 down a path onto the narrow road we just looked at. In terms of the question about the school, Chair, I I believe it is or it was a Church in Wales school. I think it's already been sold. Yeah, Councillor Murphy saying it's sold already. I suspect there will be a request for residential development on there on a small scale.
Right, thank you for that, Mark. Councillor Webb?
There's a bit of a debate around the topic, to be honest, Chair. In many quarters, it's viewed as duplicating other powers, and environmental health can control it if it's a statutory nuisance. You can impose a condition. We can do it as part of the construction management plan. If I'm honest, it's tidier for us if there's just one control via environmental health, but we can do it that way.
Councillor Brown, did you wish to come back?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say I think that a construction statement would be useful because, I mean, if you look at condition 3 and 4, basically you're sort of reserving things that you want to be considered at the full planning stage. And I think it would be useful if you put something like, not necessarily a very hard condition, but something like a method construction statement will be considered at the detailed planning application stage. So if you say will be considered, then obviously it's up to you what you put in it at that stage, and I think that would be quite a good idea at this particular juncture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to comment?
Chair, could I just mention, sorry,
Yes.
I don't think it would meet the condition tests to require submission of that at the reserve matter stage. It would be prior to commencement. They'd have to submit it, but there's no reason why we couldn't consider the detail of the planning application without knowing the construction methods. So I agree that a condition can be put on there, and we'll agree to do that, but it should be pre-commencement rather than prior to or with the submission of reserve matters.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Somebody moved, was it? Giles moved for it and you seconded. So a show of hands for approval,
Is that
please.
with the condition added?
Yeah.
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 That's unanimous, Chairman.
Right, thank Page 19, and this is 00380, and Councillor Evans will now leave the chamber, and Councillor Webb. Okay. Right, that's for you, is it, Craig?
Yeah,
Right, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application's DM 2018-00380. It's for the erection of 4 one-bedroom terrace mews-type dwellings within an existing garage plot at the moment along Elm Road in Caldecott. This is a photograph from when members were on site yesterday of the redundant garages. There is a demolition notification which has been allowed on the site, so the developer, MHA, Monmouthshire Housing Association, have actually can actually demolish this site at any moment in time. So members should look at this as a brownfield site, really, as flat in terms of the garages not being there. In terms of the history of the site, MHA have provided some information in terms of how they were leased. 15 of the 32 garages were not let previously, so there was a lot of the garages not being used, and verbal feedback was that they weren't being used for parking of vehicles in any case. And obviously vehicles change, technology changes over time, and potentially they're not fit for purpose and dilapidated now. So that's the information that's been given to us. MHA have also said that they are looking to improve the garages at Park Road in Caldecott, and the leases will be offered to people who were leasing these garages here as well. So they have put things in place to try and accommodate the loss of the garages. So the application itself deals with the construction of 4 mews dwellings. They've been developed, as is outlined in the report, by Cardiff University, looking at a different type of development, different design, which is fit for purpose and for life, really. So they've been designed for from cradle to grave, so to accommodate people of varying needs throughout their lifestyle. And they're all affordable, so the 4 units would be for affordable purposes. Phil, this is the proposed site layout. As you can see, the 4 dwellings go in a terrace, so continue the street scene. And they're 2-storey at the front, and then with a wedge, they lean down to a single storey at the rear. There's also, if you can look there to the north of the site, there's parking, 5 spaces, and also a little driveway to give access to some of the local residents who have vehicle access at the moment. So that would be retained as part of the development. Let's go to the next plan, Phil. So this is the isometric drawings of the proposed development. So this is how the street scene would appear. As you can see there, they're quite contemporary and modern in terms of their design and the fenestration that's chosen there. And you can see the landscaping and the gabion baskets, which would create a natural barrier there at the front. Again, there are more images to show you exactly how they're going to look and how they've been designed. So each one would have a private garden at the rear as well, the garden, store, and parking opposite. It's a section through the wedge. As you see on the bottom plan there, you can see how the roof works. And there's a first floor element with a staircase going up to 1 bedroom on the top. If we just go to the floor plans, Phil, I think this shows the internal layout of the units, which are about 5.2 metres wide by 12.5 metres long. At the front, they would reach at the 6.4 metres, and the back, approximately about 2.5 metres. But as you can see, there's a kitchen, a bathroom on the ground floor with an open space living area. And on the first floor, then there's a 1 bedroom and a small ensuite bathroom. And that's the front. If you want to leave it on the isometric drawings, Phil, I think it's probably best. So you can see the... Yeah, that one's good. Yeah. So that gives you an indication of how they look. In terms of the materials, the proposed dwellings be constructed, they'd have a metal roof, so it's quite contemporary. They've explored different options with the developer in terms of looking at different materials for the roof, but this is, in terms of the design concept, what was chosen, obviously for costability as well, because they are affordable units. They're also going to be white rendered, and the openings are going to be aluminium, which is going to be a grey colour, so very modern in appearance. The boundary treatments would all be mid-grey, close boarded, and we'll go for a plan in a minute in terms of the boundary treatments. The application itself, we've had some late correspondence come in today. Caldecott Town Council haven't got any objections and recommended approval of the application. We've had no concerns raised by any statutory consultees. Welsh Water have raised an issue with some of the public sewerage being at the site, but Monmouthshire Housing are aware of that. In terms of local residents, as members were there on site yesterday, we have received some correspondence with some of the concerns relating to the boundary treatments and some of the retaining walls, which, after speaking to Monmouthshire Housing Association today, I think it'd be good to propose a condition that we look at those conditions and the developer works with those local residents to ensure that the correct retaining wall and boundary treatment is put in place. So on the plan, they've outlined there's going to be a close-boarded fence, but until the garages are actually demolished, they can't say structurally how the garage is going to affect some of the boundaries. So they're happy to work with a condition, to work with the local residents on that matter. There's also concern raised with regards to surface water drainage. Obviously, as you can see at the moment, there is a large impermeable space there, about 900 metres squared. The actual proposed development would result in it being reduced to about 300. So there's a significant difference there in terms of surface water runoff, so that should be a net increase in improvement. There's also been concerns raised in relation to parking and just parking generally in the area, which members might have seen yesterday. Historically, there is reduced parking standards there, which if there was a new housing development today, then we'd have more stringent parking regime. But in terms of this proposed development, it actually meets the highway standards, and highways are happy with the parking provision. In actual fact, it goes over and above because it provides a visitor parking space, which you only usually need 5 units for that. So they've the 4 units here, and they're still providing the parking space. So in terms of the proposed development, we think it's very innovative. It seems like it's something that could be rolled out potentially across Wales if it was something successful. It's that sort of economies of scale that could be developed across the country, really. This is the first type of development Monmouthshire Housing are trying to do. So it's affordable housing, as I say. So it's should be really innovative for Monmouthshire to be involved in it. We're really happy with the design, and we've been working with Monmouthshire for quite some time now in getting the right scheme together. So we think the visual impact of it would be an enhancement on the area for members who were there yesterday. This development should enhance the area and hopefully improve overall. In terms of impact on neighbouring properties, we feel the privacy and the distances are all acceptable in terms of planning legislation, and subject to those conditions in relation to the boundary treatments. We want to look to approve the application subject to a legal agreement to say that these will be kept as affordable housing in perpetuity, and MHA have obviously said that they're happy to do that and provided us with a legal agreement at this stage to say they're happy to do that, and also for the conditions outlined in the report. I have had the conversation with Monmouthshire Housing this morning, and if possible, some of the conditions would like to be proposed to be amended so that we phase the development so they can start a bit earlier. So in terms of the construction traffic management plan, we're looking to work with the highways officers now. So if committee members are minded to approve the application today, can I ask that it goes back to the panel to just confirm those conditions, the exact wording, the trigger dates in terms of when Monmouthshire Housing can actually get on site and start. So that's it in terms of the presentation. We recommend in approval subject to conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you very much for that detailed report, Craig. The local member, Councillor Eason, wishes to comment first of all before we discuss it as a committee. Thank you. You have 6 minutes, Councillor, and 2 minutes to sum up if you so desire.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Craig has raised, and I think he's answered most of the questions I was going to put this afternoon regarding boundaries and matters like that. So really, I don't need to say any more on that because you've got that in your comments there. You've also had late correspondence regarding the water runoff. I still have far be it from me to argue with Welsh Water, but they've come up with a view that the permeability of the ground will be sufficient for the runoff from the buildings. But if you read the report by Integral Geotechnique, they feel that my understanding of it is they feel that the ground will not really take the water that would be required to come off that ground. It says initially the water on their testing, initially the water drained away into the gravel subbase layer on both sides. However, the infiltration rate slowed down at about a meter depth, which suggests that the permeability may not be there. And I'd like the drainage system to be looked at again with the planning application. Not that I want to stop the plan. I fully support the need for these houses. There is at the moment a sump drainage in 2 gardens off the back of one set of garages. There's already drainage in place within the site, which could be utilised as drainage system. It would avoid then runoff from the development area, which is onto Elm Road, which is already inundated at times with water from Elm Road, Oakley Way, Sycamore Road and Hazel Road. So my only concern now is that the points you've made, Craig, are all there, and they will be addressed in the course of time. I would like to the drainage to be looked at again in another manner to see that everything is in order. Regarding the garages, no, they haven't been demolished. They're going to start taking them down next week, and I've got the demolition and traffic plan. There's no problem with that. So I've got no more to say. I believe you've covered most of my concerns in your introduction, and I support the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Councillor June Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I fully support this application, and following the description by Craig, I have no hesitation in moving that the plans be passed.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, looking at this, it looks a good scheme, but one of the issues that has been mentioned is about drainage, and I was just wondering, there was a report, I can't remember whether it was this one or in relation to the other MHA application about ensuring that surface water didn't join in with the sewage side of it, and I was just wondering whether the condition in number 7 ought to be amended to say prior to construction of the dwellings a sewage and surface water management plan shall be submitted. I don't know whether that's something that could be considered. The other point in relation to drainage is I do understand that things like surfaces can be made of permeable material, which may also assist. So I was just wondering whether that had actually been considered. The other concern I've got about the application is I would like to have seen a bit more parking there, because I think there's 4 dwellings, 5 spaces. I appreciate it's 1 per 1 bedroom, but I do think that could be on the low side myself. But those are the three points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howard, I believe you're next, please. Or is it Debbie? Well, Councillor Blakeborough then. Thank you.
Thanks. I was on site yesterday looking around, and parking seemed to be the biggest issue. And I do sympathise with the neighbours when they're talking about lack of parking, because I know with MHA we've had problems with Landogo. It's when sort of 2-3 bedroom houses were built before we had the the additional planning guidelines on parking. But when I look further into it, for me, I do think planning has listened to their concerns, because as a result of that, they've accommodated their concerns about access and parking by removing 2 of the units. So it was 6 units, it's now 4 units, and they've done that so that there's a wider access and you can have parking along there, and obviously better parking. They are 1-bedroomed properties, so that is 1 parking space, and actually technically I guess having visitors parking is that bit extra really. Design, right, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's interesting, I don't know, it's very Scandinavian and I think it could look amazing, but there's always a risk it could look terrible. I agree with you. I think it's one of those things we need to pilot. Let's have a look at it and get it built and then review it then. I think it is quite exciting, the way forward there. Just the metal roofing. That's probably one of my biggest things. Is that a cost thing? Would metal roofing last as long as, say, slate roofing?
Do you want to answer that? Okay.
The roof was discussed at length during discussions with Monmouthshire Housing in terms of deliverability, and the overriding message in terms of this development obviously needs costed and the viability of it in terms of producing and developing these affordable houses. So in terms of the design approach and the modern contemporary look, that was what they were going for, and then also in addition to that was the cost element as well. So it has been robustly looked at in terms of what can be developed, and as this application has been submitted to us as officers, we feel that it's acceptable as it stands, and we're happy with the proposal.
So in terms of sustainability then, do you understand that a metal roof will last as long as, say, a slate roof?
In terms of my knowledge of metal roofs, maintenance and it would be down to MHA obviously in the long term, but they're happy to have that roof, and I presume modern technology enables that. I'm not an expert in terms of roof materials.
Right, thank you. I've got Giles next, then Councillor Harris, then Councillor Davis, and then Councillor Brown again, and then Councillor Dovey. Councillor Harris? No, sorry, Councillor Howard now, then I'll take Councillor Harris.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. It looks like I'm going to be the odd one out this afternoon, so I agree with the principle of the development and the scale and the layout, but to me it looks like the sort of development that's been designed by people who won't ever have to live in them. I think the fenestration to the principal elevation is dreadful. We've got a letterbox window at the ground floor level that's not in line with the sill of the door, so I assume anybody in there is going to have to sort of crouch down, and if they want to see who's calling at the front door. You've got what I can best describe as a protruding dog cage at the first floor with some kind of grill over it that makes it look prison-like. And it's I think it's reminiscent of the sort of housing experiments that haven't aged well and haven't worked elsewhere, or where subsequently issues have come to light. I think the designs in Dufferin, Fairwater, even Farfield as Park Hill, these grand ideas that when it comes to delivering them end up being a terrible mistake. I note the comments made by Craig there about Home for Life, but I do wonder what sort of Home for Life would have a two-storey void inside it. It's going to be difficult to decorate and clean, and a metal roof that every time it rains is going to sound like a snare drum with every drop. It's incongruous in its setting. It bears no relation to any of the surrounding development. It's visually unappealing. And I was comparing it with, I remember when I was little, I lived in the Midlands, so my family lived in what was left of wartime prefabs. And I think those prefabs were better. They're certainly better to look at. These are going to be people's homes. They look cheap, they look nasty. I think they deserve better. And why on earth we couldn't have had the designs that proposed for Abergavenny here, I don't know. But you have to drag me out of here kicking and screaming before I ever vote for anything like that.
I think you've made your feelings very strongly heard indeed by the committee anyway, and everybody's got a right to state their own feelings about any application. Thank you, Councillor Howard. Now we have Councillor Harris, I think, next, then Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we're nearly a fifth of the way through the 21st century, and there's not a lot of 21st century stuff around in the area. So when it's built, and if it's built like this, then we'll have plenty of comments. I'm absolutely sure. But looking at the roofs, as far as I can see, can we go back? They're semi-south or almost south-facing, aren't they? Can we see if we can see what the? Well, my point is they're metal roofs, and as far as I'm aware, and I stand to be corrected, I believe it's now possible to get roofing tiles that actually are solar panel tiles at the same time. I would have thought with a big roof like this, it may be more expensive, but think of the savings that would be generated. If such a thing does exist, why can we not talk to Monmouthshire Housing to see if the extra expense initially can be defrayed by massive savings over the 60 or 70 years at least that these are going to be built. And if it's possible to talk to them about that and produce a roof not too dissimilar to this that actually acts as a solar roof, I'd be more than happy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Do you have any comment on that, please, Craig, about the solar panels?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the design overall in terms of the orientation of the buildings, and they've been designed to take maximum sort of sunlight and take that heat in terms of the location of the metal roof and take that heat and insulate the building as well. So the way they've been designed, developed and orientated is all about how Cardiff University have come around this development. So they've been developed with that energy efficiency in mind. So in terms of this, they would have solar panels on them. The tiles that you mentioned aren't as efficient actually as a normal solar panel. So there would be solar panels on here. They're not part of this planning application because they would need planning consent. But eventually that would be MHA's view in the future to do that. But in terms of the orientation and design and the size of the roof, they've all been designed to be energy efficient and to be insulated, etc., etc. So there are those benefits in it, and there's reasons behind where we are in terms of the design now.
Right, you're satisfied with that, Councillor Harris? Yes. Right, thank you. Right, Councillor Davis next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't on the site visit yesterday, but I'm very familiar with the area because I live in Caldicot, and anybody that walks around the garages in all areas in Caldicot will tell you they're an absolute eyesore, falling apart, look terrible. I was here when we had the presentation, when we were shown the design, and we talked about these things like the heat retention and all that. You know, we have many people who are absolutely desperate for housing. This is affordable housing. We need to push on, and with that housing, Our LDP, I know, is going to look at that, how we can get more affordable housing. I personally like the design, so I would like to second Councillor Higginson's proposal for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Davis. Now Councillor Dovey next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I find myself in cohorts with Giles again. I applaud people trying to be innovative and in design, but I think the only thing that really you can say about these is there's not enough of them to become invasive, if you like. If this is the best we can do in the 21st century, then it isn't very good. The big issue that I have with them is the flat roofs. Part of that is the waste. Yeah, mono-pitched. Is that named after the river? Which is what we were going to talk about, possible leaking and water. In my experience, flat roofs always cause problems in the medium to long, or slide inflation. Then, always cause problems in the medium to long term. But the one thing that worries me more about them being used as a principle is the noise inside and out when you get heavy rain, and you also can have a problem with temperature. So I am not in favour of the roofs, and I'm not really in favour of the design of the buildings.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. I should imagine that it will be the insulation would have quite a different effect. You know, a tin roof with no insulation is going to be noisy, but I should imagine that will be quite heavily insulated. Craig could answer any questions about the metal roof.
So, Madam Chairman, I've had to work in under roofs like that, insulated and all, and it isn't a wholly good experience.
Councillor Brown, back again, please.
Yes, thank you. I haven't had any of the questions answered in relation to the points I raised earlier in relation to whether the sewage condition could be added, and a comment about the parking, because I know there's another scheme that is basically the same number of units in this thing that does have more parking, even though it is above. That's a discretionary issue, and I wondered whether there'd been discussions about whether there was a need for more parking. The other thing is that I am listening to the comments of other councillors. Although obviously this housing is needed in terms of affordable housing, I am somewhat concerned about the materials that are being used, and I wondered whether or not, so that we could come back and have a look at this later with and not close the door, whether we could have a condition looking at the material of the roof as such, because I'm not sure, for example, if the roof is made of tin or whatever, then the issue is obviously if you've got a tile and you have a leak, then all you need to do is replace the tile. Now, if you've got a tin roof, does that mean you've got to have to replace the whole thing? So there's sort of future maintenance issues that are, I don't know whether being considered, and insulation issues and noise issues as well. And in relation to surface water, obviously the drainage system is also how water drains off that if there's a heavy rainfall, because obviously with a peaked apex it all runs down, then goes round the gutters and so forth. But you've got this going in, one sloping in one particular direction. So I think that does actually, particularly this roof issue, and I think it would be helpful if we actually had a condition to say that the roof, the insulation and the roof materials will be agreed with the local authority, so that we can go back and have a look at these issues that have been raised at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Becker and then Councillor Feakin.
Yeah, I think, the value in the innovation here, I'd like to hear more about. Is it actually the cost of building them that's the value that comes out of the innovation in the design? When we're talking about the materials, I think we're looking at it with a sort of last millennium mindset, really. The materials that this building is being designed out of probably contribute to the thermal envelope of the building, which increases its energy efficiency. Those would have been the sort of things that a university project designing buildings would have been looking at. We're not doing this, let's stick an asbestos roof on it, it's a tin shed kind of drum thing. This is supposed to be a more effective design. Equally, a single sloping roof for draining rainwater leaves you with one gutter to clear, which is at a reachable height. It's actually easier to service and harvest the rainwater. So I think that, some of these design elements we should probably be a little more open to. I can't say I'm mad about the aesthetic of it, but if we're to have innovation in our housing, then we do need to lead the way a little bit. And when this is a good sized project for us to try some of these, not only the designs, but also the relationship with people like the uni for designing these things. So, it was moved for approval. I'd happily second it for approval, but I would like to know if the value of the innovation comes in the construction cost of the build. So.
Do you want to answer that, Craig?
Yeah, that's fine. So the value comes in all of it, really, in terms of the design of it, in terms of the materials, the costing of it, and the efficiency, energy efficiency of it. So they've been designed to be fully energy efficient and sustainable, and also to be from cradle to grave, as I said, so adaptable as well. So in terms of the internal layout and the way they work for disabled people, or for younger people, or for older people, they're fit for life, really. And the value is in all of it. It's in how it's been designed. Some of the things you've mentioned in terms of the lean roof, the lean-to roof, and the guttering, and I'll come on to the drainage in terms of Councillor Brown's question in a minute, but the values in all of it, so it's in the actual aesthetics of it and the enhancement of the area. And I know some councillors have raised some concerns with regards to the design, but in terms of planning and what we look at in terms of Design Commission for Wales is context and the area and the setting, and obviously as we stand at the moment, there's a lot of semi-detached modern buildings. This would actually enhance the area, in my opinion, my professional opinion, in terms of what's there at the moment, which is dilapidated garages. So in terms of the development as a whole, the value is in the design and also how it's going to be used and the costings of it for the future. Do you want me to answer some of the other questions now as well? So in terms of the noise of the metal roof and the installation, this is something that I did raise and discuss with MHA at the time, and I've raised some of the same concerns that you've raised in regards to noise. And with the installation as well, I was relieved to say that they convinced me that this is something which the sound would be reduced and it would be a level which would be acceptable. And again, it's quite subjective. Some people like to sit in a conservatory and hear the rain, other people don't. So I think in terms of the overall design of the development and the costings of it and delivering 100% affordable and the design aspects of it as well, it is considered to be acceptable. So in terms of the roof, then we have actually settled on that, if you like, in terms of the overall development. In terms of the service water, as you said, Councillor Brown, there is a condition relating to that for a detailed service water management plan to come in to deal with the drainage. As I've already mentioned, the service area at the moment is impermeable, so that's 900 metres squared, and this would significantly reduce that by 2/3, so down to about 300 metres squared. So the permeability would actually increase. It would be an improvement. And also, obviously, the landscaping of the site would obviously help with all of that. And again, the guttering on the one side would go to soak away, which would be approved by building control then. So that would all be acceptable. And foul sewer, would you say? Sorry. Yes. So that would be a matter for MHA to deal with in terms of working with Welsh Water to get that correct. It wouldn't be something that we'd be securing by a condition at this stage, given the scale of the development.
Thank you very much, Craig. Councillor Feakin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. And only to pick up on the points that have already been raised, really, largely by this side of the room, in as much as that the design is subjective. The building control will take control of the U values and building materials to make sure that they're suitable for purpose. Press seam zinc roofs are perfectly acceptable, and Duragur in certain parts of the world, and Duragur in certain parts of this country as well. Slate is heavy, it's better than stone tiles, which the surrounding properties have got. So for me, it's adding something which is a little bit special in a setting which at the moment is a baseline of garages, which is appalling, to say the least. And so it's going to add something which is unique, and more than anything, the biggest value is it's providing 4 homes, and I think that's where we're coming at, 4 affordable homes. So for me, it's a win-win.
Thank you, Councillor Fegan. Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, just a point on the roof of those properties there. There are many houses in Calicut that were built by a predecessor authority to this authority with similar, with roofs exactly the same. And if you go around the Denny View area of Calicut, you'll see them.
Thank you very much for that information, Councillor. I believe it's been moved for approval. I think we've discussed it enough. Oh, sorry, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say to Councillor Brown, as she looks at condition 6, prior to the construction of the dwellings, the exact materials for the dwellings and hard standing areas shall be agreed in writing with the local planning authority. So it's down as a condition already that we'll be looking at it.
Yeah, Chair. Sorry, could I just clarify? They would be looking in a visual amenity type appearance sense. We won't be looking at how it's joined together and if it leaks or what noise properties are. They're not really planning considerations for us.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Brown, quickly, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to say that I would have liked to have the condition to have added sewage or surface water, just simply because obviously there may potentially be capacity issues, because why would the water board suggest that they can't connect any surface water to the mains if there wasn't a capacity issue there? And
Chair,
that's just a question
Chair,
in relation to condition 7.
That's a standard requirement from Welsh Water. One of the issues that causes flooding is when you have a downpour, and in the old kind of Victorian type pipe works, the surface water goes into the sewers and they can't cope with the sudden rush. So their standard response from Welsh Water is always, you cannot put surface water into the foul sewers. They have to be into separate sewers or via some kind of SUDS drainage system. So that's normal. Welsh Water would have to approve the drainage details alongside building regs, and they won't. Your foul will have to go into the sewer as first port of call. They won't agree non-foul drainage in a sewered area unless there's really extreme circumstances. So Welsh Water wouldn't agree anything different anyway. And surface water cannot go into a sewer unless there's really extreme circumstances that mean they can't do anything else. So I get your question, but it is covered in other ways.
Thank you for that, Mark. I think I've debated this long enough, actually, Councillor Brown. Very
Madam
quickly,
Chairman. Yeah, I mean, the reason I raised that is I've got particular issues in my ward about, problems with capacity and sewage. Okay, thank you.
Well, we have to deal with what we have here in front of us today. I believe it's been moved for approval and it's been seconded. Sorry. I believe he told me earlier on he wouldn't have. That's quite. He did have the opportunity anyway. Thank you, Rob. So it's been moved by Councillor Higginson for approval and seconded by Councillor Alan Davis. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
And those against, Chairman?
Page 25, and this is in Abergavenny, and it is 00381.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so the application is DM 2018-00381. It's a very, very similar application to the one we've just been discussing for Monmouthshire Housing Association. So this is an alternative scheme, same sort of premise. There's existing garages on the site at the moment, which is Landoff Cresoni Road in Abergavenny. Members were there yesterday on the site. This is a picture of the garages. Which again have become quite dilapidated over time. Phil, if you want to go to the next screen. So this is the site, this is the back of the garages and the open space. and this is the path which runs along the back of the garages, which provides access for people. And that's the proposal. So it's very similar to the previous scheme. Cardiff University, again, have designed this terraced courtyard bungalow. It's a single-storey building. Again, 1 bedroom, and it's cradle to life, been designed in the same sort of manner, but it's a different design. So these have an internal courtyard. If you see on there, you can see they have a sloping rope from monopitch which goes internal, and there's a little courtyard, private courtyard for each individual resident. So they'd have that. And also the open space at the back would be a bit more communal, so that would all be open for people to go out and sit in if they wanted to, etc. So again, this is the proposed floor layout. So you've got open plan living area, kitchen area, bathroom, and a 1 bedroom. And then that's a courtyard then next to it. No, sorry. And this is the isometric drawing of how it looks in the area in context. So they have a central chimney. There's a row of terraces, and obviously 2 on the end there are back to back. So there'll be a bit of a contrast in the street scene. But again, in terms of the overall development, it's quite an innovative design. It's a different design from the one we've just been looking at. It's a different type, which potentially could be again rolled out across Wales if this was to be successful and cost effective. And it's all 100% affordable as well. So all these units again would be asked to be signed in to be affordable in perpetuity. And MHA have obviously said that they're happy to do that by legal agreement. And this is a design of the buildings. They're quite low. As I said, they're single story. I think they're about 4.1 metres roughly, 4.8 at its highest point, and 2.7 metres at the eaves. If you go to the next one, Phil. And again, these are the drawings that have been produced, the graphics in terms of how they're going to look on the ground. Central chimney, again, modern fenestration, but quite different from the Mews we were just looking at. This courtyard bungalow is quite a different design approach. In terms of the application itself, or in terms of the materials, they're similar to the last one. So they would have a metal roof again. External walls would be rendered, and they'd be grey aluminium for the windows and doors. In terms of the application itself, we haven't received any objections on this from any local residents or any parties really. Local member Roger Harris, I'm sure, will speak on the application in a moment. The principle of development is acceptable. It's within the development boundary. We haven't got any concerns in relation to impacts on privacy or the private amenity of any of the local residents. Design, we feel, is acceptable and innovative again, same as the previous last one. And overall, we think there'd be a big enhancement to the area in terms of the visual impact and the street scene and the context. So we are recommending the application is approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Craig. Is there a member on the committee? Councillor Harris, is your ward? Right, thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll take your suggestions first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have had discussion with one of the residents that lives very close, and he's a traditional man, and I think he's a bit alarmed about the radical design, but only alarmed, not from the point of view of don't you ever build that over my dead body sort of thing. So I think it's going to be a fabulous use of that plot. You saw from the initial slide, and just like the Caldecott slide, they're appalling, those garages. They really look bad, and to have this in place is going to be a good thing, and I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm assuming that we say yes, and if we do, the comparison between that and Caldecott will keep us busy for years as to which one's going to be the best. So we've had a lot of discussion on the previous Caldecott one. I would like to see this in place, and as a ward member, I'm moving approval.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Comments now further. I'll take Councillor Blakeborough, then Councillor Howard, then Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Well, first of all, yes, I would support the decision to approve this. This is a bit more exciting to me. I think the design is a bit more interesting. Just in terms of the two, because they're two pilot schemes in terms of design, the one we discussed earlier in this, will we, as a committee, have the opportunity to see the finished item, if you like, and be part of the discussion if they're going to roll it out throughout the rest of Wales, that we could have some sort of input in terms of assessing how aesthetically pleasing and how well they're built.
I'm sure that we'll have a design tour at the appropriate stage of once it's developed, actually, Councillor Baker.
That'd be good. So yes, I would support the approval. Yeah, all right.
Councillor Howard?
Yeah, I'd have been happy to second these as well, Chair. What a vast improvement over the application we've just seen. There's an element of convention with the modern aspects. The only thing I wonder is there's an awful lot of render. Would it be perhaps better to, maybe for the applicant, to consider something more like a spar dash finish, and one that won't lend itself to a kind of spray paint quite as easily, or moss growth sort of thing, I'm thinking. And particularly since the side elevations don't have any windows in, and it's pretty inactive. But other than that, yeah, an awful lot better. I wonder, maybe the chimneys need scaling down. There's something reminiscent of the crematorium about them because they're very, very prominent. But yeah, otherwise, I really like the design. I like Debbie. Whether I think schemes are great or not, I like to go and have a look so I can either eat humble pie or say I told you so.
Time will tell, Councillor Howard. Councillor Brown, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the design of these is significantly better than the last application, and I was pleased to see in this one that the car parking provision is 7 parking places, 1 space for each dwelling, with an additional 3 spaces for visitor parking. And you know, I think there has to be an allowance for visitor parking, even though that is beyond our standards of 1 parking space per bedroom. And you know, in terms of actual practicalities on how these schemes operate, otherwise you have cars parking on pavements and that sort of thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Also, going back to the chimney, I thought it did look a little bit heavy-handed with the chimneys in comparison to the actual building. Anyway, that's my interpretation. Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I thought these were significantly better designed than the last ones, and I'd be very happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Becker.
As we're all talking about how things look, which seems to be slightly outside of our remit, but I'd have to say I'm no more wild about these than I am about the other ones. So, especially with the heavy-handed chimneys. But I stand by the previous comments. You know, if we don't have this innovation, we'll never find out if we can do things better. So.
Right, so I believe it's been moved for approval and seconded by Councillor Powell. That's right. Show of hands for approval, please.
That's unanimously approved this time, Chair.
Right, thank you. Yes, you can do, Rob. Craig wishes to comment.
Just is that subject to conditions, the same as the last one, so we confirmed the panel? Just want to change the word on some of the pre-commencement conditions.
Yes, that would be fine. I think, is everybody agreeable with that? Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Craig. We'll now wait for Councillor Webb to come back into the committee. Councillor Webb, sorry. No, he isn't. He's gone. He's gone. Yeah, he wasn't. We go back now to item 5 on the agenda on page 31. Is Amy, is she?
Yeah, she's just on her way, Chair.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the other 2 appeal decisions first?
Yes, we can do the 2 appeals first. Everybody okay with that? Right. Do you want to do that? Right, thank you. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this application there's an appeal which was dealt with by myself. Ruth also came to the informal hearing with me as well, in terms of viewing the appeal proceedings. It was an application to convert a dilapidated barn at the farm and renovate it for a enterprise dwelling for an agricultural worker to work on the farm. However, there's a bit of concern over the historical nature of the barn and concern over the stone building actually being rebuilt over time. So we have concerns over whether, well, it is a new build in the open countryside. But in terms of the technical advice note in relation to agricultural workers' dwellings, it does state that new dwellings need to be located within the farmstead and not isolated. So they need to have a visual and also a functional connection to the farm. This building actually didn't. It's quite a significant distance away from the farm. I'm not sure we've got any additional plans here today, but it is quite a distance from the farm, and our argument is that if they wanted to have a new dwelling, then that could be located on the farmstead to have less of a visual impact, could be modest in scale. This is quite a significant building for an agricultural workers dwelling. So there was several reasons why we decided to refuse it, and the planning inspector agreed with our decision to refuse the application and said that even though we weren't arguing about the actual principle of an agricultural workers dwelling, it was the siting in this location and the type of dwelling that was being proposed. So if they would have applied for a simple bungalow type property on the farm, in the farmstead, that could have been acceptable. But the inspector actually agreed with us on this particular decision.
Well, thank you for that, Craig. Is there another one that you want to discuss? Is it Phil?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with this one, to be honest. It was for an access at Parklands, Llandogo. So it was an additional vehicular access from a holiday let within the grounds to provide a separate access to Parklands itself. So it was a holiday let and Parklands. So it was a highway safety issue by the look of it, yeah. So whilst we refused it, it was allowed on in terms of highway safety. The benefits were apparent to the inspector, which obviously weren't to us. So was it highway refusal, was it? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Chair. I'll go on, Craig, if you know detail.
Yeah, my colleague Joe Draper dealt with this planning application. There was no concerns really in terms of us as planning officers. The highway officers objected on safety grounds in terms of the main roads in Llandogo. So they were concerned about creating another point of access and another area where potential accidents could happen, but the inspector didn't agree with that. So they were happy to allow the application.
Additional, yeah.
Thank you very much, Craig. I think Amy would like to introduce herself and her new helpers in her team. If you can do that, please, Amy.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for having us here. You've all seen a copy of the report, hopefully. Essentially, we provide this report to CADU every year as the terms of our delegation. So it just gives a summary of what we've been doing, how many applications we've determined, and all the other activities. So I thought it would be helpful just to report this back to you guys to let you know what's going on behind the scenes, really. Because not a lot of the heritage applications come through Planning Committee. So it'd be quite helpful to kind of give you a picture of the rest of the work that we do. So most of you know me, Amy Longford, but you won't know, or maybe you do. Molly Edwards is our Heritage Monitoring Officer, and Jonathan Morgan's the Senior Heritage Officer. We've also got Ben Terry, who's the Urban Design and Landscape Officer. He's part of our team. Unfortunately, he can't be here today, and more unfortunately, he's actually leaving us at the end of May. But Ben plays quite an important role, not just in heritage, but in terms of urban design and DM as a whole, and also that role will be quite important in formulating the LDP and placemaking agenda that's coming forward in the future. So we are going to be refilling that post. We're currently changing the job description and doing all those bits and pieces, but hopefully that advert will go out soon. So I was just going to run through the report quickly and just give you the key headline figures and some updates that we've been going through, really. But we deal with quite a few applications. We have had 102 listed building consent applications, 9 conservation area consent applications received in the period, and determined 116 of these. But to put that in context, Cardiff Council process 68, on average 68 applications a year, and the National Park, which are probably more similar to us in terms of their volume or number of listed buildings, was 62 applications. So we have quite a high caseload compared to other local authorities. That's gone up as well from the year 16-17, from 68 So again, we've just seen an increase in applications there. We also have quite a high approval rate. Very few applications do get refused, and it is our attempt of every single time to negotiate to a successful conclusion. So we'll do our best at trying to find out what the applicant wants and try and find a compromise as best as possible. From April this year, from now, our figures, our 8-week figures, are going to be included in the statutory returns, and they're a key performance indicator. So you can tell from the table that at the beginning of the period, we weren't doing very well, but we've made a really big push on timescales, and that's come up quite significantly now into January's figures of 64% and 100% in extension of times. So we haven't got February, March and April's figures because of the changeover in the computer systems, but I'm sure Phil is working on that. So out of those 116 applications, only 8 were refused. So that just shows how small proportion of applications we are actually saying no to. One of those was Molly's, which was Welsh Street in Chepstow. I don't know whether you've been fed back the appeal information on that yet, about the signage. That was really positive. And we're now pushing forward with formal action to get that signage removed. So it's another work that Molly's doing. The Britannia Inn is another application that came through here. The applicant withdrew the appeal in the end, and just as an update, those beams and that floor is still there. Wincliffe Court was another application that came through. That appeal was, or their appeal was dismissed, but they've now challenged the High Court, so that is going through that process as well. That hearing will take place on the 12th of July. You might be interested in that. Yeah. We've also been involved with the M4. There was another application that came through committee for the demolition of Woodlands House that has gone through the public inquiry, and we are looking at alternative sites. But again, that's up to the minister to decide what they want to do with the M4 because it is intrinsically linked. So as well as applications, we also deal with a huge amount of discharge of conditions applications, making sure that all the details and everything is right for those buildings. Molly mainly deals with discharge of conditions applications, and we had about 40 of those applications on top of the 100 odd of full applications. I'll skip you now through consultation response and grant work to planning. So as well as the applications, Ben does a lot of work in terms of responding to planning applications. You've probably seen quite a lot of his responses coming through the applications at committee. So he does a huge amount of that work, which helps really with kind of positive management of the conservation areas. Later on in the report, there is some sections on the conservation area appraisals, but with limited time and resources at the moment in order to take on new appraisals. So Ben's work is really quite important in making sure that positive enhancement of our current areas is really being looked after. But Ben's done a huge amount of work in other areas. He's also worked in Abergavenny, the new public realm works that are going on in Abergavenny. We're heavily involved in that. We're also in the early stages of discussions about some public realm works in Monmouth, and potentially, although I think funding is not there at the moment, but for Usk as well, to do some public realm works in Usk. I'll skip you on to pre-application advice. We have, in July this year, the fees for pre-app went up from £60 to £120. That hasn't, we were worried that might put people off applying for pre-app, but it hasn't. It's gone up from, we had 47 pre-app applications in the period, and we had 50 the year before. So clearly people are really still interested in the service. And that's brought in just over £4,500. So that's, although it's a small sum, every little helps, as they say. But that doesn't include for the additional officer charges. We go out on planning application pre-apps, and there's an additional fee for that. But just the way that the data's worked at the moment, it's difficult to extract exactly how much that's bringing in. But we also offer fast-track listed building consent applications, processing those now. That's been really popular, as well as the pre-purchase packages and completion certificates. So all in all of that work that we've done this year has brought in just over £8,000. So again, a small fee in the big pots, but that's quite a big significant change in terms of our heritage services, we've never really charged for services before. So that really shows that actually people are interested in accessing the services and they are willing to pay for professional advice. So that's something we're really going to try and build on next year as well. So we also deal with enforcement. Molly, again, does a lot of the enforcement here. Both Jonathan and I have also been involved as well. There's quite a few examples here of the enforcement cases that we've had. We went through them recently. So Molly's got over 70 open enforcement cases at the moment, so it's quite a lot. So we've traffic lighted those and really tried to prioritise the important ones. But Molly's been working with Glance Back Books in Chepstow, really turned that round. She's done a fantastic job there. We've also got the Welsh Street case that we're going to push forward. Likewise, Jonathan dealt with the King's Head in Monmouth, been heavily involved with them. And we actually served a temporary stop notice. We were the first local authority in Wales to take advantage of that new legislation through the Historic Environment Act. So that was really positive, really helped them kind of start planning. So Jonathan spent a huge amount of time getting them to sort that out. So that's brilliant. We also do a lot of monitoring. As I said, we deal with discharge of conditions as well, but the monitoring is really important just to make sure that they are actually complying with the approved plans. The amount of time we spend ensuring that those details on the plans are right. It's only fair that we make sure that actually happens. Again, there's quite a few examples in the report of the main cases that we've been dealing with, but this has helped build relationships with people, help them access our service, and we've actually had quite a few fast track applications come through from that where people wanted to make changes on site. So again, that's just improved the customer services on offer, really. Again, I'll skip you down to buildings at risk, another really important area of work that we have to deal with. There's a description in the report about each of the key buildings that we're working on now. But in terms of Pearsfield, just an update with that, we're trying to get access to the estates director for the main company, hopefully in London, and going to meet with them to talk about how they can look at some propping and remedial works on the house, but also a long-term future as well. We're aware we don't want to just put another stick in plaster on this. It's got to look at enabling development and long-term sustainable use for the building, or what's left of it anyway.
Would it be possible to look at that site sometime?
Of course, yeah.
It's really interesting, the stables and everything, so interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, no problem, we can do that. I actually went with Cadw recently, and they are quite keen on upgrading the listings for the stable and the barn as well, just to increase the importance of the site. But yeah, we can definitely do that. The Priory as well, you probably all know, in Usk, another key important building. The Civic Society have been really keen on trying to push this forward, and they've been brilliant and offered to pay for the valuation to be done on the property so we can start looking at alternatives. So I'm trying to arrange that with them as well. Kerwin House, again, that's come through for yourselves. Work on site has stalled due to Spittlefield's previous projects overrunning, but they are doing monthly site visits now to try and keep on top of the building and start clearing it out. I've had some more paperwork through this morning in terms of ownership and issues, but we still have a whole process of compensation to deal with for the previous owners. 10 New Market Street is another project that Jonathan's been working on, and we hope to try and get a Section 215 notice served on that building by the end of the year. I'm making that commitment now. And Troy House is another one you have also looked at, a planning committee, another one that's been really important on our agenda, probably one of the most important buildings that we've got to look at now. We really need to deal with an urgent works notice there. And I phoned Welsh Government this morning to try and get an update on them. They still have not confirmed whether they're going to call it in or not. And they can't give us a deadline of when they're going to make that decision, which is rather unfortunate. And again, the King's Head in Monmouth, Jonathan's been dealing with that one. We've been looking at plaster repairs, paint restoration, conversion, structural work, enforcement work. It's been a huge amount of work on that property, but that's been really helpful and really important there. But I would also like to put forward that we develop a buildings at risk strategy. So we look at trying to prioritise these buildings and putting some realistic actions against them so that we can start to really target our time and resources where it's best placed. So hopefully we'll start to develop that for the rest of this year and then report that back to you as well. But other bits and pieces that we've been taking on as a team, we've been involved in a Welsh Government task and finish group to look at collaboration of historic environment services between local authorities. Cadw were leading on that, and they've prepared a report that's gone to the Minister, so hopefully we'll see the outcome of that report relatively soon. But that's also been done in line with the work that they're doing in North Wales in terms of their heritage services, where they have joined and they've created a kind of regional group. We've been feeding into that North Wales research in terms of how we do things here and learning from them, and hopefully them learning from us. So that's another positive thing we look forward to in the rest of the year. Cadw approached us to help them deliver Heritage Partnerships Agreement as well. They want to start to trial some projects, and there's a large landowner here that is interested, so hopefully we'll be able to develop that with them and look at ways of being able to make sure Heritage Partnerships Agreements work, not only just for the applicant but also for our internal processes, and it doesn't involve Cadw putting all the work on us. So it's got to be a shared system, I think. But also, we are trying to push forward for enhanced delegation. So we'd be the first local authority in Wales to have fully delegated powers on Grade 2 star buildings as well as Grade 2. I spoke to Cadw yesterday, and they're going through some procedural issues, but they have said to report back to you that they are looking very positively at that and hope to have a thumbs up soon. So I'm not counting my chickens yet, but hopefully that's going to work out. I also gave evidence at a public inquiry for the Welsh Government on the role of the historic environment and the role of Cadw recently. They've produced a report which has suggested that Cadw do need to be a little bit more forceful in terms of their actions and things that they take on, but also to bring back their funding schemes. Taking away that funding has caused a huge problem, so they are kind of bringing Cadw to account, really, which is a really good thing. And then we've all been involved in the South Wales Conservation Officers Group, so trying to build a more professional forum for officers to share information, experience, understanding, and there's a programme of CPD that kind of follows with that as well. So hopefully that we're not chairing that anymore. The chair's moved on to the next local authority, but hopefully that will keep up, and we're doing the same things next year. But sorry for the whistle-stop tour, but I'm conscious you've been here for a couple of hours already. So, any questions? Oh, God, loads.
We're going to be inundated
I
now,
that wasn't
I think.
very good.
Well, I must say, Amy, thank you ever so much. It was very detailed, and I'm sure most of you have been very enthusiastically reading all of that. And we have got a lot of hidden gems in Monmouthshire, so we must take care of them. I think we owe it to the future generations as well to look after what was in the past. And I'd like to welcome Molly and Jonathan to sit there. It's not too onerous to sit in front of the committee, but at least we can put a face to the names now as well. So there's quite a few that want now to ask questions, so I'll start with Phil on my left, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You'll be delighted to hear only quick ones, Amy, and you know what they're about. Yeah. I note that the compensation negotiations, I know they've been ongoing for ages. It says on here, anticipate it's going to take 6 months to complete. That worries me in terms of the fact that they didn't do anything that they promised to do with regards to keeping the building weatherproof last winter. Can we impress on them that if they're not going to start until this winter, they really have got to do it. Otherwise there'll be nothing for them to build. The amount of damage must have been dramatic. And I know that Jim and I need to talk to you about the tippling, but we'll do that after the meeting, unless Jim's got a particular thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just will.
I'll follow up with you then, Jim, as you've been mentioned.
Yeah. It's in relation to the Tipton philosopher,
Yes.
Chepstow Road. And they want to build a garage, attach it to the existing house.
Yeah.
Now, my recollection is that there was, what was there previously was attached to the main building. Because what I'm told is, is the advice, if I put it that way, that the garage must be about a metre away from the main property. But I to be quite honest with you, I see no reason for that. Because, you have a windy alley, if you like, between the garage and the property. And to me, it makes sense to move the garage and attach it to the main residence, and access and so on can be included in that.
Do you want to have a quick chat afterwards
Yeah,
about
fine.
this one? Yeah.
I'm just going to say, members, we can't
go.
go case specific. We just wish a few comments on what
Yeah, no
Amy has
problem.
actually produced. So I'll go along each avenue of seats so that we can try and cover everybody, because most hands went up. Councillor Harris, quickly, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations, Amy, on the report. I don't remember you doing a report like this before.
I do it every year, but it just goes to CADU. I've never brought it to committee before, and I thought we would spend a long time writing this and collating the data, and I just thought it goes to them, which is great, but it would also be helpful to present that to committee as well. So I suppose this is the first time we've done it. If you'd like us to do it again next year, we're more than happy to do so.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think
there we go.
it's a good report. It's very readable, and I think all members should see it as well, to be perfectly honest. Just not members of the planning committee. So they know what's going on, especially on the historic side. So thanks again.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks. Thanks for the whistle-stop tour behind the scenes, because it clearly a heck of a lot goes on behind the scenes. Molly, have you got a twin? Because I don't know how you could do all of this. 700 open enforcement cases on top of everything else. And I think that's the thing. These are the kind of things where your kind of commitment and your passion makes sure that you preserve and enhance our history, really. And these are the things that people aren't aware of. Two questions. One, given the workload that you have and also successfully meeting those targets and some, given it's a rural area, so obviously travelling out and about, and you are very committed to good engagement with people, that takes time to build those relationships up. Now, within your team, you have 4 full-time workers.
Yeah.
How many full-time workers do they have in Cardiff in comparison? And I'll ask this next question, then this too. And then just the second question, I'm always concerned about collaborative working. It should be a positive thing because it's about sharing knowledge and good practice. Is there any risk of this collaborative working taking control out of our hands within Monmouthshire or losing any funding?
Firstly, in relation to other local authorities, most local authorities just have one heritage conservation officer. We're really lucky we have more here, but in comparison we deal with all of the work that's in the report, but also applications. Like Jonathan takes on the majority of applications, but we do end to end. So in other local authorities, the conservation officer might be a consultee on an application. We deal with everything from start to finish, the advertising, the negotiations, the report writing, the lot. So therefore, it does take more of us to do that. But in the national park, they have one specific dedicated heritage officer, and I think they've got a part-time officer as well, kind of feeds into that. But yeah, we do have substantially, I mean, we have, near on 100 applications a year, and they have just over half of that, so.
I guess I was asking that question because obviously I'm concerned on capacity, because I think you're probably saturated, the four of you, with the workload.
Yeah.
And then the next question, just about the collaborative working.
Yeah, collaborative working, I think, is a really interesting way of dealing with it. I think there's a lot for us to learn collaboratively, and I think where it comes back to having individual officers and other local authorities, they can possibly feel isolated and working alone. So team working is really, really important. But I equally feel it is very important that we don't take the emphasis on dealing with the historic environment in Monmouthshire as well. So I don't know what collaborative working is going to bring. I don't know what shape it's going to come in, but I would like it to be that we all work together, but we still have a strong lead in Monmouthshire.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Obviously, it goes without saying with Molly having a surname like Edwards that she's going to work hard, but we are not related at all. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I think it's very good to hear, to get a report and hear the background on, because we don't know what's going on, and, it's important to preserve the heritage. And I mean, it just says a lot about Monmouthshire that there are so many applications that, sort of what historic buildings we've got in the area, which is good. Coming back to Troy House itself, you mentioned about it being referred to Welsh Government in relation to whether they were going to call it in because it was in flood zone C2.
Yeah.
Is that just notified to the Welsh Government because it's a heritage building, or would it be notified because of the flood zone 2 and residential development?
It's the flood zone that triggers the need to refer it back to Welsh Government. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
They'll
be making that assessment on whether the application will have an inquiry, and then would be just balancing the impact and the benefit of preserving, basically the conversations that we've already had here as part of committee. So weighing up the harm versus the benefit of saving the building, really.
Yeah, because there was an application in my ward in zone C2, and that was approved, and I didn't hear whether or not that had been notified to Welsh Government, but you're saying as part of the procedure it should have been.
Well, I don't know about that particular application,
Yeah.
but Troy House has been notified, and we're waiting for a call in. Is that yours?
Yeah, Craig,
in terms of notifying in a C2 zone, you have to have over 10 houses or more. So unless it hit that trigger, so it wouldn't. With Troy House, it was 26 or something, so or more than that, 32. So it would hit that trigger. But with other developments, it would. The one thing you're mentioning, it would be for smaller developments.
Councillor Dovey, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, excellent report, and if we get them annually, it will be great.
Yeah, happy to
really
do so.
valued. Anne mentioned the house on the race course. I too am interested in what happens to that. That could be a huge attraction for the town if the right thing was done with it. The other thing is great with the beautiful blue building we've got in Welsh Street.
Yes.
The one that really annoys me immensely is the dentist. The dentist just down the road from there. And all the plastic banners they've got hanging all over the place. Does that fall within your remit to deal with that? Because it's a Georgian house with all the bits and pieces.
Is it on the other side of the road?
On the other side of the road.
Right, okay.
Just by the side. Just by the side
yes.
of the entrance to the dell down to the castle.
Could you please address Amy or whichever appropriate officer instead of taking it
Yes.
now specifically
Yeah, we
till
can chat
after
about
this
this
report?
afterwards. Yeah.
We're dealing mainly with the report.
I'll come and find you.
All right.
Okay.
I just wanted to know whether that was within her portfolio. That was all.
Right, thank you,
Chairman.
David. Do you wish to comment at all, Councillor?
Afraid so. First of all, thank you for the work you do, especially Molly. Well done on the glance back. That was a mess. We could just sort out the Rainbow Cafe at the other end on Moore Street now. Great. This is going to be a bit of a difficult sort of question to come up with any kind of proper answer, I think. But given the sort of changing relationship with CADU and the historic partnerships and the extension of your own sort of powers if you get the Grade 2 star listed and things like that, is that going to affect what we can do about things like the port wall in Chepstow, which is obviously a CADU overseen element? Are we still going to be as hands-off with things like that as we always were?
Yeah, essentially, the delegation now, and if it was enhanced, would only relate to listed buildings. We wouldn't be dealing with scheduled monuments or buildings that are ecclesiastically exempt either. So it is just listed buildings, really. So the same situation would apply.
It's still something, though, isn't it? So
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Councillor Feakin, then Councillor Howard, then Councillor Webb.
Cheers. Thank you very much. And very quickly, two questions. One is the collaborative approach. Is that including the national parks?
Well, the Task and Finish group looked at how we could all work collaboratively in South Wales. That report, as I say, don't know what the result of that is going to be. The North Wales group have kind of trialled things by themselves up in North Wales. There's fewer authorities in North Wales, obviously, so their relationships are a little bit easier to develop. But if we were going to work collaboratively with somebody, it would make sense to work with the National Park or our immediate neighbours, say Torfaen or Newport. I think we are a very similar local authority to the National Park in terms of our numbers of listed buildings and the types of buildings that they have in that area compared to us.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And just very quickly then, it's just, I think with the paid services, I think we can be ambitious with it. I think if you was to claim or sort of put like a gold standard £500 application in or whatever it is, I think you'd be surprised how many people would accept that and would take that up.
We've had some really positive feedback, actually, and people, we were a bit nervous from going from 60 to 120, which doubles, it's a big step, but people are really pleased that they get somebody to come out, to come and see them, and like you say, that really positive engagement really helps build those relationships and show we are about trying to manage the buildings rather than just say no to everything. We're looking at trying to find that compromise and trying to figure out what they want and find a solution for everybody, really. So it has been really positive so far.
Thank you.
Chair, could I just add really briefly, just it's a point we've probably discussed before, it's not within our control, but one of our challenges with our management hats on is listed building applications are free. By law, we have to do a press notice bilingually. So before I've even put a bum on a seat, we're at a loss. It's quite an archaic way of doing things, and it's something we're trying to lobby the Welsh Government on. And they have recently conceded that local development plans, we don't have to do the press notices anymore on those. So we're hoping that will extend into planning and listed building consent applications. You know, in this day and age of websites and other means of communication, it is rather old-fashioned. But that is one of the challenges. So these extra services that Amy's been driving forward with the team have really started to help out. We've drafted a report actually for a meeting I'm going to tomorrow with chief planners from around Wales as best practice. We're a bit of a pilot in terms of these extra services, so we're sharing what we do. We did poach a couple of ideas from Wrexham, so us and Wrexham are leading some of the discussion on that. But feedback so far has been really positive, and there's certainly more we can do, but we'll include that. I can ping it around later this week actually. But we'll also include it in our annual performance report, which just sets out what we've achieved this year. I think the services in total were made just under £7,500, but bearing in mind we didn't really roll them out until July last year, and then we did it slowly as a trial, and it's picked up pace. We're conscious that if we really market it, we could get more in again. So we're just trying to get that balance between that and resources at the moment with other things going on. But it's really positive stuff that we're trying to develop.
Thank you for that, Mark. Councillor Howard.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask about a site not very far from here, on the Pontypool Road, just between the two entrances to Glasgoyd, and it's a 3-storey farmhouse, and it's got a cluster of buildings, stone barns. There's a scheme there ages ago, and I remember we had a committee site visit. I think Simon was still here at the time. But other than a couple of the roofs having the new trusses and the dormers, which have started to fade and age, I hadn't heard any more about it, and I wondered if there was still a live application or there was some negotiation And other than that, Chair, I want to reflect on the work done at the King's Head as well, and having spent a couple of happy years working with Jonathan, who sat opposite him, I know it will have been very onerous going to the King's Head quite as much as it is.
Thank you.
Is it still live? I believe it is, isn't it?
I'm not entirely sure, so we can have a chat again afterwards if you want.
That's fine.
Thank
you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to comment at all? Right, no. Well, I can only say thank you all very much indeed, and we welcome your input to look after all our parts of Monmouthshire. And thank you. We look forward to another report now. So you've set the benchmark rather high, I think. Yeah, thank you and the team very much indeed, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that is the end of the meeting, I think, as of today. But if you would all kindly wait for 5 minutes while I think Richard has to turn off the live streaming. Thank you.